Everybody, happy to be back here. We talking about SATs today. The SATs still matter. Is it still helpful? Do we need to reform this thing or whatever? Come on the other side. Let's talk about it. Hello there, everybody. That's Omar. That's Juke. That's David. I am Charles, and welcome back to another episode of the Five Star Classroom. Jubilee got 8 cameras up, so we're gonna get some echoing in, but it's okay because it's not gonna be my voice echoing. I'm gonna throw it to the man, the myth, the legend, the man whose hair gets blacker every episode, the man that you never know where he is. He is the new Carmen San Diego. I don't know if they're gonna like him being the man or whatever, but the one and only, our model, your friend, Omar Yanar. What's up, O?
What up, what up, what up, man? I mean, San Diego, maybe she was Latina, so now you've got like a Lebanese Mexican hybrid kind of dude. So maybe just in the battle of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we stayed solvent there. We just stayed on the level.
I thought DEI was dead.
I mean, according to our last episode, man, it was
I don't know.
DIA, man.
We killed
on
it.
arrival.
DEI is DOA.
You're taking a job from a from a lady, man. She might be Hispanic presenting, or I don't know, but I'm just saying, brother. You gotta.
She thick as hell. I'm real, man. What you got? Like, what you got? She thick as hell. Some dude was like, "Hey, let's think of somebody." Yeah, her name's Carmen San Diego. It's Where's Waldo?
I love that show. I used to love that show.
San Diego
I used
was
to
the
love
joint.
it so much.
Me too.
Yeah, man.
Charles, where you broadcasting
fit.
from, Charles?
Carmen San Diego fit was dope.
Well, if we talk about where in the world is Carmen San Diego, they want to know where in the world is Charles.
Are you safe?
Home. I'm
Okay.
home. I'm home and I'm safe. It's very, very busy. I'm working on a deadline, so I was on a writing blitz, and so I could just maximize all the time. Sometimes I write in my room, so I have like a pocket desk in here. So
It looks like you're in a you're like the scene out of Breaking Bad.
gotta go.
I
chop
mean,
it
at
up,
first
man.
I felt like Charles was like being held hostage or some shit. It's like, I'm coming to you.
And that's
from a
pretty
dictator.
glamorous for a hostage.
But thank you. Everybody else said my room like a dungeon. You said it looks nice. I appreciate you. The one person on here with some taste.
Man, I can't see the room, man. It's dark as hell and it's blurry. Like, what the
Well,
hell
I-
is Jubilee
I have
talking
to
about?
focus on
What
me.
do you
This
know
is all-
about
It's
that
aesthetic.
room
It's
that we
aesthetic.
can
It's
You
talk
all
gotta
about?
right.
create.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, you gotta create the aesthetic, the calming,
All right.
relaxing, so you
Based
can
on
write.
that
Well,
information,
that just
we're
took away
always
the
doing our
check-in, though. So
check-in.
get us into the topic, O.
We
No, we gotta check in.
Oh no, man!
Thanks, David.
Listen, I want to cut check-ins almost off unless like you've got something badass to say, because we're always like, "Hey, how was your week? Yeah, weather's nice and shit like that."
I got
Like,
something
unless you're
badass to
popping
say.
with some like
I got
real
something to
cool
say.
ass shit. Like I saw the New Hampshire primary personally, so I have nothing substantive to check in on because ultimately you don't know where I usually am, and I'm trying to keep it a secret. And I just got back from a secret location. Jubilee, what's popping?
I think that is so funny. Meanwhile, when Charles be like, "Please don't tell people where I am." Sorry. Okay.
Charles,
here we go.
don't want people to know.
No,
That's good. That's that right.
they
I'm
don't need
not
to know
mad at
until I
it.
come back.
Right. That's a great strategy. My check-in is that I met with some children who, hi, Dr. Jackson. I met with some children today who will be in my reading groups. And it's badass because they are struggling readers, and I'm going to have the opportunity to help them become better readers and avid readers. And that is important to me. So that's my check-in. I am fulfilled.
That's awesome. All right, David.
All right.
How you feeling, brother?
So we are in the throes of applying for and like researching high schools here for my son. And we've got to visit a bunch of schools, and it's everything from, the kind of subdued, muted conversation in the library to like the larger high school that has a full-blown pep rally with hamburgers and hot dogs and marching bands and all that stuff. So all that to say, for people that are running schools, working in schools, and for parents that are looking for schools, make sure that you get out and attend those open houses to get a feel for where you're going to be for the next 5, 3, 4 years, whatever it is. And if you're running a school, make sure that you're paying attention and putting resources into having multiple open houses for the community to come in at different times of the day to see what's going on, right? It's really important. You kind of get like one chance to get that first impression, and so that's that. Secondly, we're dealing with an infestation of gophers, and they are tearing apart our yard right now. And so we are going the humane path, trying to get rid of them. But I've never had this experience. Like even today, my wife was telling me, like, come look in the backyard. They're literally, you can see a plant that's in the ground, and the gopher is like chewing the roots and like trying to like suck it out of the ground. And they don't even care. You'll go up to them and they'll just like look at you. And so I'm starting to feel like this Bill Murray character in Caddyshack, for those that are old enough to get the reference. So I'm looking for gopher abatement tips. Yeah, exactly.
They sound like Brooklyn squirrels. That's what Brooklyn squirrels.
They're
do.
terrible. Yeah,
they look at you like what?
They don't care.
Squirrels are less invasive. Gophers will mess up your whole lawn. And we had some gophers before the winter came. There's like a Miss Helen took care of it because she handles all the plant stuff. So for the rabbits, she puts cayenne pepper on stuff, and that gets them. Yep. Or you can paint rocks like to look like strawberries, and that'll stop them. Gophers, it's like this little black thing that you have to like put in the ground. And I mean, well, you said the humane way.
That's where we're starting, right?
Yeah. You don't have to kill them things, bro. Like if you,
I'm gonna end up blowing them up, but for now.
Yeah, I can ask Miss Helen for the remedies for you, because she got rid of them. I came in my lawn, it was these little black things popping out the grass. Like, what? Like, that's to get these damn gophers. So I said,
they can pull a bush into their tunnels. Yeah, they're crazy. They are insane. I've never dealt with them, so that's a new thing for me. First world problem.
They will ruin the ecosystem of your.
Yeah.
If you are actually serious about growing stuff, you do want to handle that.
Yeah, we are. We're serious about growing stuff. So yeah, we're definitely gonna do the humane thing first. But we'll see. Thank you for the tips. We got some good tips in the chat. All right.
Man, I felt like the chat was all over the place, dude. Like humane them. We got like a smoke them out. I don't even know like exactly what that means, like literal smoke or like the proverbial like just shuffle a bunch of stuff down there and get them out.
No, I think it's like
more.
No, that's like actual smoke.
Yeah.
Then really this situation about your gophers, man.
Well, that's the new show. The new show is Lawn Life. There we go.
Hey man, lawn life's real, dude. People know.
Yep.
People know about that lawn life. So Charles, man, any other than the fact that we mistook your very lovely room for a hostage situation?
No, man, I got there's like you know what I'm saying? It's
hard to see. It's hard to see.
We out here. I pay for art in this room. It's an art piece right here. Anyway, don't get off of how I rock in this joint. But nah, man, I'm good.
No, man, you turning this into MTV Cribs.
I mean, I don't know about all that, but very busy working on some stuff right now, and just trying to get it knocked out, man. And so that's why I'm in here, because sometimes I can get some of my good writing out of my office and kind of in a more relaxed setting. And then last night, want to show love to our partners at the BS3 network. I've owed them for a while to do, guest spots on some of their shows. Y'all saw I've been trying to break in and talk about these movies, and they happen to be doing Killers of the Flower Moon last night. And Bill came and David came. So I appreciate y'all. It was really fun. It was really fun. I love what we do here, but education, I'll be like, yo, this is I'll be banging myself. I'll be like, what is it? It's like all day PD. So I got to talk about something mindless and talk about that movie, which was really dope. So it was fun.
So what is this, man? Like you got invited to, like, I didn't know about this, man. Like we got invited to a movie screening or something?
No. So BS3 is the person, that's the group that we work with. They we're on there, so we're on Roku. And they have a lot of different shows. They have sports shows, they got other talk shows, but the forecast is for people like us, but they talk about movies and they break down movies. And it was just really fun. It was really, really cool. And I got to be there on a special night. One of their people was missing, but one of them had something, really, really interesting happening to them, man. And it was just it was fun. It was just really fun. But I had been owing them some spots for a while. And the person that started it, we went to high school together, man. I love Ben. So it just finally worked out that I was able to do it. Didn't take any prep. And we had a good old time. But as we transition, because I know we got to get into your topic, man. We got to get into this SAT joint, bro. What's happening here?
Yo, man. It's big talk, man. Big talk. So if we're going to dive right in, let's dive right into this. So our topic today, ladies and gentlemen, is really a discussion about the ACT and the SAT. So for those of y'all, and I'm sure most of y'all know, but if for whatever reason, we need a little bit of context, a long time ago, the College Board, which is an organization that said, hey, man, we got students coming in from California, from North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Texas, and we need some standardized way to understand where their skill sets are at. Because educational practices in Texas are different from California, or different from Idaho. So for those of y'all that may be in the know, the states really dictate how education is run in their state. Like the Department of Education nationally has about like zero power other than to provide grants. They are really a very powerless institution. Their job is mainly to promote some initiatives, get some grant money together and be like, hey, we like this initiative, apply for it, we'll give you some money, right? Cool. The states run education. So the colleges had this difficult time deciphering, well, we don't really know how a student from Texas is going to compare to California. So what if we create a standardized test, practice, if you will, to understand apples to apples, how a kid from Texas to California to Idaho to North Carolina to Maryland to Illinois would compare. Thus was born the SAT and the ACT. And recently, ladies and gentlemen, schools like MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, a lot of the Ivy Leagues, Harvard, UPenn, said, we're going to go ACT and SAT blind. Meaning we're really going to, like, if you want to report your SAT scores, cool. If you want to report your ACT scores, cool. But we're going to try to consider a bunch of other things besides these tests, because this is one of the topics about, have these tests kind of favored a certain population or not? Have they been something that have held back Latino and Black and low-income students? And thus why these universities have said, we're going to go a little bit blind on these things. And they've done it for what, Dave, like 2 years, I think? I feel like it's been about a year or two that they've been essentially saying it's optional whether you want to report. Well, ladies and gentlemen, recently, and I believe led by MIT, I think they've been the first out of the gate to say this. They're like, we made a mistake and we are 100% going to start looking at SAT and ACT scores again. Because what they found is that when they went blind, their student population, well, they were finding some interesting results. Those results are things that we are going to talk about today in terms of like, all right, well, cool. Like, is this a good thing? Should we get rid of the SAT and the ACT? What are the inherent biases that exist within the SAT and the ACT? Meaning, like, are some populations just going to do better because they got money for things like tutoring, which I'll give a couple fun examples about? Or, is this the best way to decipher if a student is going to be proficient in college or not? So let me just say, like, right out the gate, and I want to start getting everyone's initial opinion on the SAT, the ACT, maybe even your own personal story about it. And kind of the first question, which is essentially, do you think that it's perpetuating disparities in higher education? What has been interestingly found in studies, and this is why I think a lot of universities decided to maybe take a step back from such heavy reliance on the ACT and the SAT, is that there's been very little correlation to determine if you do well in the SAT, you're going to do well in college. That's a fancy way for being like, just because you score high on this test doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do well in college. So the studies have said GPA, your grade point average, all your grades kind of average together. A lot of colleges have said the kids with higher GPAs have demonstrated greater resolve and greater ability to navigate college than these like SAT and ACT scores. So what's going on now? Why is like MIT basically coming back and be like, nah, we're going to implement it? So I want to pass it to the group and ask really two questions. Really, one is optional, like what's your own experience with the ACT and the SAT, kind of your opinions on it. But then our first question is really out the gate, like, do you think that reliance on tests like the SAT and the ACT are perpetuating disparities or discrimination in higher education? So feel free to jump in. I'm always happy to share my story, but I'm going to keep talking for a second. Everyone all at once. Cool.
So
let me go ahead and
are we going to show? This is where we show.
Everyone wants to step up at once. I leave it up to the open to have a good ass conversation.
Yeah.
Everyone's waiting for the panel. Like it's Adolf Hitler time and shit.
You want us to show our SAT scores? No.
Oh shit! Look, look at that, man. The man's got 1,600.
Go ahead, David. I'll go after you.
All right. Yeah, I'll go quickly. I mean, my experience with the SAT was one of a kind of a pioneer in that, like, I didn't really know what the SAT was until I got into the 10th or 11th grade. My parents had obviously, as farm workers, never finished K-12 in the traditional sense, didn't know about it. So I was like, part of being like a first generation college student meant that you had to hit all these like benchmarks before you even got to college, and the SAT was just one of them, right? So, I obviously took the SAT, didn't do very well on it. I never took any SAT prep classes and just kind of had my own, high school coursework to prepare me. I don't even think I bought a study book. I just went and took it. And so that was my experience with it. I do think it's worth, talking about the industry, the test taking industry, right? The people that run like national tests, state tests, the College Board, these are all private for-profit companies, right? So these are not like attached to any particular like governmental public entity. They're private for-profit companies that make money off of this assessment industry, right? So I think that's also worth exploring. The third thing is I'm not like a fan of, and I'm also not going to say we should throw out all of these things, but like so many other indicators, like the GPA, which are very subjective. For me, even though the ACT and the SAT are quote unquote standardized, they are standardized to a particular cultural norm. And they do not control for the quality of education that somebody has had until they've taken that assessment. So there's also a tremendous amount of subjectivity in these standardized assessments, which I feel like is the bias that we talk about. So, I don't think we throw it all out, but I think we definitely need to reevaluate. It should be included, but like a much smaller piece of the pie, in terms of evaluating whether or not somebody is, eligible for entrance into any particular college or university. That was my diplomatic response.
That was super diplomatic, man. You decided to leave the controversy for later in the show. All right. Okay.
Well,
Get an audience to stick around. I like
look,
it.
man, I know what our show is. I know who watches our show. I know what the right answer to these questions are, like of evil and it's racist and it's, and it's a monopoly, all of which is true. Like, you know what I'm saying? But I think, for me, I wasn't thinking about that deeply when I was that young. It just was a process and a thing that you had to do if you want to go to college. I remember the ACT being marketed to Black kids more than the SAT, even though I ended up taking the SAT. But we had like Kaplan came in and did like a study thing for us. And I remember being in that group after school, but then getting mad because like it was some of that stuff we were seeing for the first time, which was like annoying because it's like, why don't I know this? Like this, I mean, and I know I'm going against the whole opposite of don't teach to the test type thing, but like it was some interesting questions that we had that I'm like, I wish I knew how to do this. I scored a decent score for the people that I was taking it with, but not a good score in the whole, national pool. So when you ask about like, the role of the SAT, ACT, look, in California, if you had over a certain GPA for CSUs, they didn't even look at your score, right? So like if you had if your cumulative GPA weighted and everything was more than 3.0, your score became less significant, which is why a lot of people wanted to make sure that they, that they had the right GPA. Look, I get it though, and people don't like to say these things, but it is meant to be discriminatory. Like that is what I used to have to do, this thing where you have to work with the College Board, right? When I first became a social worker, and then it was kind of a social worker weighing into education. So the College Board has, meetings and people all around. They have to find ways to make decisions about who gets in. So if everybody got the same grades, if everybody got this, like we're going to take this percentage that perform well on the SAT and on the ACT, but this is where you start learning as a Black kid to start, you better rehearse your sad story. So I did this and that, and I had a lot of clubs and things that I was in, but I remember so much. I feel like at my school, they devalued the SAT, ACT score and was really kind of working us on the story. Like, we got to help you tell this story. And I remember writing drafts and getting notes back to put more sauce on it, basically. And as I look back on it, I think that might have been, somewhat more demeaning than the damn SAT or taking that with things that I should have known. So, people are going to vacillate on this. I think it was popular to say, get rid of this test. We got to build this and whatever. We keep talking about the evil of standardized tests, but we have not found national ways to actually replace it. So I'm good for these tests being replaced, but you got to continue and finish the work. You got to finish that job and put something that actually does measure aptitude, and to help those universities be discriminatory, so they can make the decisions that they need to make. If we still value college, I mean, this may all be moot in about 10 years anyway. So,
Yeah, man. I want to continue on that trend, and Juve, we want to hear from you. What was your personal story? How do you feel about this? I do want to say that we're going to have a guest, maybe about like 7 minutes, who's going to talk about our second question. But I really wanted to unpack kind of like, how do we feel about this thing? Is this really the most excellent indicator? So, Jude, kind of back to the question, how do you feel about this as an indicator for college success?
I mean, I think it is. I think that, that hasn't been disproven yet. And basically the most recent research says that the SAT is more of an indicator of college success than high school scores. And I think that's part of the problem, right? We have a lot of inflation. Scoring can be highly subjective, right? Like if Mr. Yanar, is the GOAT and he's my favorite teacher, I might suck at world geography or whatever it is, but we've got a strong rapport. So I have a 98, average in your class when really, my aptitude in that content area is a 74, right? Who's going to come find Mr. Yanar and be like, hey, like, show me the test scores that align with this average, right? Like, who's doing that? So I think we do need something that is able to show like really where, students are falling. I think to Charles's point though, the SAT, the ACT and tests like it, also show the knowledge gap that exists in misrepresented, underrepresented communities. That knowledge gap, like that whole thing about why didn't I know this? How come I have never seen this word before? And they said this is a 10th grade word, and we in 12th grade, and me and my homies ain't never seen this word, right? Like, so it brings that whole piece up again. And like I'm not like I'm more of a both and, right? So I'm not gonna be like, oh, we need to just eradicate it, eliminate it, never use it again. By the way, that is my Trump voice, and I have been working on it. By the way, anyway, right? Like, let's get rid of it. What's his fingers? Whatever. Anyway, when he goes, look at my African
It's not a good
Americans.
test. We got to get rid of it.
Look at my Mexicans, right? It's fake news, whatever he says, right?
The SAT, what is this thing? We got to get rid of it.
Yes, it's fake news. We got to get rid of it, right? Like, so I'm not going to say that. I think we do need to take a better look at how these biases show up. And you know how I feel, right? Again, back to the comment I make like every other episode. Where are our national standards? Where are our stakeholders that are in this work, right? Where are the parents, the teachers, the superintendents, the principals, the people that are in the work to be able to give this kind of feedback and create this thing that we could use, right? It's not going to be perfect, but at least there would be some sort of synergy across our nation with what a student is supposed to be learning, whether you live in Iowa, right? Whether you live in Mississippi, whether you live in New York, whether you live in a mansion, whether you live in a trailer park, what are you supposed to know, understand, and be able to do if you go to school in the United States of America between the ages of 5 and 17 or 18, whenever you graduate? If we had that kind of strong system, then I think we wouldn't even need to rely on a test like the SAT, or we would be able to rely less on a test like the SAT.
Man, it's almost like you need some core education that's just common amongst everybody, regardless of where you live, huh? Just
sounds familiar.
Scores that might be common, right? Like
the one thing I'll say about any kind of standardized test, if there's some kind of level of accountability tied to it, is that it does put pressure on different systems to say, like, here's an assessment, here's when young people are going to take it, here's what it looks like, here's how you can prepare for it, here's how you can integrate it into your curriculum. And then, the school systems have to do the work. I mean, the high school that I was at for over 10 years, we year over year would exceed. We were like the top performer in Oakland and in the state for low-income children for the California high school exit exam. We didn't have a choice whether our kids took it or not. Like, we had to take it. So we dealt with it. We incorporated it into our curriculum. And the same goes with SAT, ACT. Like, we offered classes. We integrated it into our coursework. If you were a junior or senior, we offered after-school courses that we didn't offer them. They were mandatory. But we did the work. We're like, you're going to have to take this assessment. There's a built-in bias, and we know that, but we can't control that, but we can help to prepare you for it. And the kids at our school did relatively well on these assessments. So I think it's easy to point out criticisms, as I've done on these assessments, but if you're working in a school, there are ways to mitigate and not work around, but kind of, address some of the historical inequities. That's not on the College Board. That's on our K-12 system.
Yeah. So, and another thought came to mind too. It's like, we're talking about the academic preparation, but as we all know, there's a whole social, emotional piece, right? There's a whole strategic piece. If you're going to do well in college, we all know it's not just about going to class and trying to get an A. If you don't learn the system, college is a system, right? Mm-hmm. Which, if that's a part of college preparation, that even if you are the scorest high and you have the highest GPA, if you don't learn, right, how to function, how to connect, how to, interact with professors, how to advocate for yourself, there's so many other skill sets that you need to be a successful college student that the SAT doesn't measure. So
absolutely. Yep.
I mean, I would say this, right? I mean, because look, 2024, the 2020s, I mean, this is where nuance is going to die on the vine, right? So again, multiple things can be true, right? Again, might be, that It might be, maybe in some places there's too much weight on that test, maybe not, whatever the case is. But here's what I know, like for sure, right? Like there were so many people, like we had entrance exams. And I was remedial everything. And I needed to be remedial everything because when I got into those places, like my school lied to me. How you got me in this AP English and AP Math? And we still not doing AP Math, AP English at this work. And then I'm in college and I can't keep up with where we supposed to be. Like it's not, listen, when I was doing my doctorate for education, they used to have two different programs. It used to be like if you're trying to do K-12 and if you're trying to do community college or university. But they started to combine it. And when they started to combine it, the K-12 people and the college people always had beef because the college people just started to disregard the K-12 people because they like, we basically got to do y'all job and our job. Like there has to be a place where you are in order for you to start and to be able to do this, right? And I think that, look, man, I know people hate the word accountability around education and stuff like that, but there has to be something where I know you have a basic education knowledge. Like if you are a doctor, there are certain basics that you have to know that everybody got. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a reason why you got to take the LSATs. If you want to be a lawyer, you got to take a GRE. You got to take an MCATs. When I was doing my doctorate, you had to take a writing test in the middle. Like check this out. If you're going to have a degree from here saying that you are a doctoral level person, you got to be able to write. And those things are not easy. Sometimes you got to take them more than once. Sometimes but it sets a standard that lets you know where you kind of need to be. I do think that they're going to keep making the GRE, the LSAT, the SATs and the ACTs. I think they're going to try to make them easier. I think they're going to try to add in some more of that social emotional stuff. I'm all for it. Like, do what you got to do on that side of things. But we keep getting further and further away from the knowledge base that people have. That's why at MIT, you have professors that have been tenured for 40 years leaving because they're saying, I'm not going to make math. Math can't be made easier. Like we need you to understand these concepts. And I think we've touched on some of those controversies as in the last few years of students are starting to say this is too hard or this is too difficult. And to be honest, I think other countries are seeing that and seeing it as a weakness. I don't think China cares. I don't think Russia cares. I think that they're like, no, we're going to do this. And we want to be the best at this. Now, if you don't want to be the best in those things, I think that's completely fine. But if you're talking about these elite level universities, like they're going to expect you to be able to do stuff. And if not, then what's the point of these places? If you don't hold a standard, then every criticism that they're starting to make about universities is going to become true. It's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and they're not going to be worth the ground that they're on. And the ground is worth a lot more than the education that's coming out of them as of late.
Look, I'm a doc, but this is where I have a difficulty with this paradigm, right? And it's going to sound like I'm contradicting myself, but it's just because I'm kind of presenting both sides. Just to sound like a Gen Z, this is a very Libra situation of me, a very, very balanced. So look, on one end, and here's the word, and I love Bill. Bill, welcome back, man. It's so good to hear from you. And Alonzo's comments are coming in badass. The balance where those two are at, I want to pose a couple questions, man. One, I have studied endlessly because it's something I deeply care about, the literacy levels of students who enter kindergarten, dependent upon the amount of money their parents make. So what the hell does that mean? I always use my niece Alea as an example. My niece Alea, her dad is a lawyer, her mom's a lawyer. That's my sister. My sister, Stanford undergrad, Stanford Law School. My brother-in-law, Stanford undergrad, Hastings Law School. What kind of, can you imagine the involvement that those two have had in the vocabulary of my niece? Statistically speaking, my niece is in that realm where she has heard millions of words by the time that she's in kindergarten and has command of anywhere from 10 to 30,000 words before she even gets to school, y'all. Meanwhile, if you're a low-income family and your vocabulary is not as high and you don't have the time because you're a single mom or you're dual parents and you're working 3 jobs and you're trying to survive, and you don't have as much time with kids because you're in a low income situation, which all 3 of us or excuse me, 4 of us can associate with some role in that way, one or the other. Luckily, I had a mom who was like all over that stuff. You're coming in not with having been able to speak 10 to 30,000 words with understandings of millions. You're understanding 10 to 30 to 50,000 words and only being able to use 5, maybe 7,000 words. That's before school even kicks in. So when you're talking about an SAT that is asking about your vocabulary from the onset, my niece, because her parents were higher income, already has a statistically significant superior ability to score better than all 4 of us. So right from the get-go, yes, dude, and I'll get to the college thing because I'm going to sound really elitist in a second, and I'm trying to ground us in both sides of this. On one side, you've got a test that is essentially deciphering the quality of your vocabulary and math skills that is inordinately based on your parents' income and their ability to tutor you and work with you and read to you. And like, dude, look it up, man. There's all sorts of research out there about parents who read to their kids have a 1,000,000-word understanding by the time, or millions of words in their head by the time they're hitting kindergarten. Now, on the other end, if you want to get like all elitist, like, all right, cool. Like, and I'm just playing devil's advocate, so I don't want this taken out of context here because, like, I don't need that in today's society.
Nuanced conversation.
Just
brother.
like Doc was saying, hey, man, listen, like, I went to Stanford, killed it on the ACT, dude, killed it on the ACT, killed it on my GPA. So I'm like, why the hell do I need people running around with shitty ACT and ACT scores, you know, diluting the pool of this elite institution? There's a reason that these colleges are elite. There's a reason that Stanford only allows kids like that and Harvard only allows kids like that. And maybe we don't need other folks. Maybe we don't need them. That's why other colleges exist, because the Stanford and Harvards of the world need to be at the highest levels, the MITs of the world. Now, how's that feel? Feels kind of shitty, doesn't it?
I mean,
now,
that's like
take into conjunction what I just said, which is Stanford and Harvard accepting students that are uniquely intelligent and at the highest levels, or have had these privileges bestowed to them because their parents were higher income? That's where I'm grappling with this right now.
I mean,
I think it's well, let me help you ungrapple, right?
That's a part of the show.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, and I think the elite. I mean, I think even using the word elite, right? The different types of educational institutions need to decide
when you say it.
what kinds of students they want to go through their programs and ultimately graduate, right? I mean, we've all met incredibly book smart, intelligent, analytical thinkers that, I mean, couldn't work their way out of an untied shoe, right? And so I think you have to look at the totality of, and that's why we were talking about using these assessments as one piece of the pie. Sure, the Stanfords, the Harvards, maybe they use more of the SAT standardized metric as their piece of the pie. But at the end of the day, you have to decide, what kind of people do you want? What kind of people do we want? What kind of young people do we want to be training, educating, to move into society, to become our next our leaders, our thought leaders, our technical leaders, our political leaders, right? Our governmental leaders. And I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, it's probably not going to be the person that got a perfect score on the SAT and that's lived a coddled, kind of privileged, sheltered life, right? Because you're missing out on a whole kind of realm of possibility of what it means to be a human being. It has nothing to do with the types of words that you understand, or your ability to think analytically about a
Yeah.
passage.
I mean,
and
I love it
respond to
because you're
questions, you know.
absolutely doing a killer segue for our next section. So I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
And I would just say, just to stay in here, man. I mean, look, like we got to start. I mean, I like that you asked how you feel, but I think that's the problem. And I think that there are different type of colleges for different reasons. Like if you read California's master plan, I think it's actually a beautiful plan. And if you haven't read it, you should read it. Go look up California Master Plan Education. And it talks about what the role of the UC was supposed to be, the private university was supposed to be, the CSU, and then the community college, right? The community college was supposed to be a catch-all. That was supposed to be where you got skills and certifications and the things that make our communities tick and go. The CSUs were supposed to be more like, managerial, or like, you getting in and you got a good job and you doing these things. And the UC, there's a reason in California, only the private schools and UCs can do PhD programs, because that's how it was kind of negotiated, right? Of what their purpose was. Now, listen, man, I was a smart kid that wasn't so smart. What do I mean by that? I outran a lot of people around me, but in the grand scheme of things, I got a lesser product. And when I got to that state school, I had to start so much over, and build that up. And because we can't hold K-12 accountable, because we can't have those conversations, right? Like, you got to figure out these things. And David says something, I think this is a beautifully nuanced conversation. SAT and ACTs are one piece of a pie in how we're considering. Like when you are a university, you're trying to make a decision. What is the best student body to have? Who are the people? So we can take a certain amount of people that might be academically behind, but socially are super forward. Or maybe this person wasn't the most academically inclined, but they were captain of this and captain of that, which means, like Ford, you know what I'm saying, wasn't the smartest guy, but he was a hell of a negotiator before he went crazy. But he was a leader and he built these things. He was super ambitious. Now, homie went crazy. That's a whole interesting history if you want to go look it up. So, I mean, when we have these conversations, we got to keep it in context of the larger piece. But what do we want? Like, what do we want? Because we talked about the privileges that people had. I grew up poor. I grew up homeless. I lived in 4 shelters, right? And still, even though this is a racist ass country, and I have to deal with a lot of stuff that's annoying and could potentially even take my life, there are still people. I'm in Chicago right now. There are people risking their life and limb to be in what I might call a shithole at times from the way that I grew up, right? So the privilege that I have of even just being an American, the privilege somebody has of being born in certain countries and things like that, right? And I just think we have to, it's so funny that the conversations around the most enlightened and smartest of the world tend to end up becoming the densest conversations, where we just say, well, if colleges just did this, or if this just, it's like, why don't we use some of that brain power and actually start to figure out these problems instead of playing on emotional tropes or playing on other tropes? So, I mean, it's a tough decision, and we live in a tough world where sometimes you got to be made to make tough decisions. So that's kind of where I'm landing at it. You know what I'm saying? Because I see both sides of where you're going. Oh, and I'm giving credence to all of them, but I don't want to just keep watering down what we do. I play sports, and I know when you're younger, everybody got to play, but the higher you get, the better you get. Motherfuckers sit on the bench, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? And like, you got to figure that out, and you got to figure out who you're going to be in that. And colleges was used to be about helping you figure out the type of person you want to be and the type of contribution you want to make to society. And it feels like we've gotten away from those conversations.
I mean, I'm with you. And I want to ask a question because I want to segue into
I don't know if Jube,
I
I kind of went long and cut off Jube. I'm sorry. I know you was about to segue. My bad, bro.
Oh, okay, Joe. You got something before I segue,
that's my
man.
fault, Jubilee. That's my fault.
No, that's okay. I'll see if we'll come back around to it later. Go ahead.
So, I mean, I think so, because ultimately, like, it's something I just shared in our chat. We're going to show it to you because it's a lot. But like, I want to pose a question and then like propose some information, which is essentially like, David, Jubilee, like, you all feel a certain way. However, I want to send a hypothetical, because I think that the Harvards and Stanfords and all these places in the world, UC Berkeley, the kinds of places that you were just talking about, need to be demystified. And honestly, I'd say that had you all had the opportunity to come to Stanford with me, forget about your SAT score. Do you think that you would have done well?
I don't know. I mean, I think that I've been very resilient my whole life. I would like to think that I would have been able to figure it out, but maybe or maybe not, right? Like, one of the people that I work with and David works with, one of the smartest people I know, went to Bolt, went to that's the law school at UC Berkeley, and didn't make it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's rough. Like that's the thing. These things are what they are because there's some difficulty there. So I like to think that I would have, but college is also about overcoming adversity. So Jube and David, I'll let y'all answer that. But
what can you say the question again?
Yeah, I mean, before I segue into the next question, I just it's a simple question. Like, had you gone to Stanford with me, how do you think you would have done?
I probably would have kicked ass. It probably just would have been harder for me because I would have had a wider gap, a wider knowledge gap, right? Because like I had a solid education, but it wasn't. I don't think that I would have. I was doing as well as like my white counterparts or people from
right.
Because I mean, when I was in 5th grade, I had a teacher that was gone for months. Loved her, but she was absent for like 3 months. Which is why people are like, you are so terrible at like geography or like northwest, east, south. I'm like, don't tell me directions like that because I can't find it, right? Like, I just have certain gaps.
So let's
in
take
my
a road
education.
trip with Jubilee, is what we're saying, man.
No, the people that be like, keep on driving east. I'm like, wherever that is, I do not know. You just tell me the address. I put it in my GPS, right? But like, I think I don't think I would have struggled, right? I think I would have had to put in more work to kind of make up for what I did not learn, right? And I think I told you guys about my 12th grade teacher, Dr. Steger. I don't know if she's still alive, but God bless her, who walked into our classroom one day, slammed the classroom door and was like, hey, I'm going to teach you guys how to do parenthetical documentation. And we were like, what? Who, how?
Yeah. I remember this story.
And that was not in the curriculum for us little Black kids in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. That was not a part of our curriculum. But she saw us and she knew, hey, I know that many of the kids in this room are going to go to college. And even though my guidance counselor would not talk to me because I didn't have a certain GPA, and she felt like, oh, you'll just go to a 2-year school, and she dismissed all the Black kids coming to our office, Dr. Steger was like, I'm going to teach y'all how to write a research paper because in a few short months, you're going to be in college and you're going to need to know how to do this, right? But that wasn't part of the curriculum. And that is what I'm saying, because somebody maybe where you grew up, right? Or in some other part of the world, that was a part of their curriculum. And that's the problem, right? Yeah. That's the problem. I think I would have done great at Stanford because I have a strong work ethic and I'm not a quitter. So I'm going to put all of my work into it and figure it out and make it happen. But it's going to be harder because I didn't get all that I needed, the strong enough foundation to immediately thrive when I got there. So I have to do
and
more.
I am going to talk about that. David, I don't know if you want to punch in really quick.
Yeah, I would have definitely struggled too, but I know I would have made it through. I would have probably struggled with the expectation level and the volume of work in the field that I ended up studying. I mean, I did it at the school that I attended, UCSD, which was an amazing public university. And I definitely struggled there, but I think the one thing that, we talk about struggle, one of the things I struggled with at UCSD, and I would have struggled more with it at Stanford, is just being around a certain type of student, young person, that may have, outscored me on the SAT, but in terms of like life experience, like came nowhere close to like what I was bringing to the table. Right. And for me, that was very alienating and challenging in college. I was like, who are these people? Where do they come from? Right. Because I knew where I came from. And I just remember meeting a lot of like, people that were my age. We were all young, but like very privileged people that just did not have, the life experience that I had to that date, coming into college and university. So that was a challenge for me at UCSD. And I know at Stanford, if I had met a young Omar Yanar, I would have been like, what's up with this fool?
I mean, no, but like, maybe, Like, I mean,
Maybe
I mentioned a bunch of.
Omar,
would've
you and
mentioned
I
a
would have
bunch of
been
other things.
besties. We would have been besties if we went to
We,
Stanford.
we
Oh
are
my
we are besties now, and we would have been besties then. See, what David would have been is like, "Hey fool, who are you?" And he'd have been all like raza, dude. And he'd be like, "You're not raza, bro. What are you doing here?" And then I'd be like, "Háblame en español. Ahorita vamos a ver quién es raza and quién no es raza." And then he would not understand a word I said, dude. Because that's exactly what happened when I showed up at Stanford, dude. I had these Mexican fools looking me up and down from East Los, and I was like, "Bro, tell me what the eagle on the flag means." And they're like, "¿Qué?" And I was like, "Dude,
Yeah,
that's what I thought.
because
Get
you
the
that's
fuck outta
because
here,
you
dude.
were speaking you were
Fuck
speaking
outta
in
here."
Castilian Spanish, man. That's why.
Yeah, dude, no, how about just Spanish, dude? This guy trying
And
to
look,
make it
and
all
everybody don't have to go to an elite college. Everybody don't have to go to Stanford.
No,
Everybody
but like,
in my
this is
like-
the segue I'm trying to get into, Charles.
Go ahead,
'cause
go ahead,
I'm with you. Not everybody's got to go to Stanford and shit, but like, here's like my beef, right? This is not an advocacy about Stanford or not. This is about like fair and unfair and what support some people get. So here's like just a quick story, and then I want to get into this segue. It's like my sister's roommate, Jane Kim. It's a badass story, dude. She grew up in Cerritos, California, so Southern California. David probably knows it super well. I mean, Charles, you may know Cerritos, man. It's like Southern California, the OC area. She was taking Kumon math and SAT preps, and she was in 4th grade. All right. Parents could afford it. That's what the local school system was doing. Meanwhile, Jubilee ain't got a teacher for several months, can't learn geography. And my English teachers are hardly speaking English, right? So, like, she's getting all this prep, bro. She takes the SAT. First off, gets like a 1590, right? Then she's like, writes the college board and says, these 2 questions are wrong. The one that I got wrong, I didn't get wrong. You wrote it wrong. Oh, here's another question that you got wrong, but I knew what you were doing and I got it right. She got above a 1600. She corrected the college board.
That's
And what
dope.
I'm getting at is that, like, that's some elite shit. That's badass. Let's look like that's like Stanford, but that's because homegirl has had rigorous preparation for that test and in the mathematical department for that test since she was in 4th grade. And this is what I'm getting to is like, I'm with Bill on this. Like, this can be maybe one of several factors, but Bill, like, I'd have to see where you're at, because have you disaggregated the data in terms of kids that do well on the SAT do well in college, or is it just kids that are rich who have upper middle class upbringings do well in college and then just they statistically do better on the SAT? So I'm having a troubling time being like, is it the score that indicates people are doing well, or is it your background that means you'll get a good score, and those are the indicators of college success? David, you got that little chart? I asked you guys whether you guys would do well at Stanford with
Charles, are you able to do this?
I'll help you.
Because honestly, it was a trick question, because I know the 3 of you would have done incredibly well, because we were going to have a guest. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it, but I can take on his component. There's been this in Bill. This has got to be like, man, I'm sure you've seen this, but this has got to be like the fodder you're talking about. There's done this insane level of analysis to determine what are some of the key aspects and competencies that extremely successful people, job, college, all the things, have had. And then they started isolating, these is like some factors that we've determined that will not only ensure college success, but really lifetime success. And if you start going through these components, you're going to, like, David, Jubilee, Charles, Bill, Alonzo, Mama Toya, Crystal, you're going to start looking at this and being like, oh, that's me. Oh, that's me. Realistic self-appraisal. Bro, my boy Alonzo in 9th grade could tell me I'm good at this, I'm not good at this. I need help with this, but I'm not great at this. He didn't have an inflated sense of his abilities, but he also wasn't thinking in a deficit mindset of I can't do this. He's like, no, man, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. But I was like, bro, I think you can actually do a little bit more. Let's try this, this, and this, and this. But check out number 4, availability of a strong support person. How many of y'all have had that teacher or that person or that mentor? And like, if you're growing up upper middle class, like, is that your parent? Is that more than just your parents? Is that your parents' best friend who's like the president of a board? Is that a lot of really great teachers? So what I'm getting at here is if you take a look at these components, I'm offering straight up, and this is, by the way, this is not mine.
You want me to just read them? You want me to just read them because they're small? People can't see it. I can just read them.
Yeah, people can't see them. I'm happy. Yeah, go for it.
1, competency 1, positive self-concept. 2, realistic self-appraisal. 3, skills at navigating systems and understanding and dealing with discrimination. 4, preference for long-range goals over short-term or immediate needs. 5, availability of a strong support person. 6, successful leadership experience. 7, demonstrated community service and involvement. 8, knowledge acquired in or about a field.
So like, when I'm and to our listeners on the podcast, thank you, Charles, because like they're not going to be able to see the chart. When we talk about question 2, what are alternative methods of assessing college readiness that can be implemented and create a more equitable admissions process? I'm championing, and this is something that this organization that I'm working with, Big Picture Learning, is championing and saying these competencies are really tied to success in college and life. The SAT and the ACT isn't necessarily deciphering this, because Jubilee, David, you said something that really rang with me. That's true. Look, I got in, and I think I got in because they were looking at like my GPA. I did well on the ACT for God knows what reason. I did not do that well on the SAT as compared to my peers, but they're like, this kid's got like grit, for lack of a better term. This kid ain't gonna give up. And Jube, when I got to Stanford, I got the shit kicked out of me. My first paper, the minute I turned it in, and I thought I was a pretty decent writer. Hell, my English teacher who was on the college board, who like did AP English, who graded the AP exams, and I got like a pinchy 4 on that exam. Wish I got a 5. I was sick that day. Like, said I was one of the best writers she's seen. I turned in my first paper at Stanford. My TA's like, you need to learn how to write better. Welcome to Stanford. I was like, man, this guy's an asshole. But it was a huge dearth compared to my peers. These cats had gone to college already in their prep schools. They got into Deerfield, Andover, Choate, all these fancy schools. Their reading levels, their analytical levels, their vocabulary, their math, it was just way better than me. But what I did have was like, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to work my ass off. I'm going to get the tutoring I need. I've got this. Again, it's that number 2. I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses, and I know how to access help. And in a year and a half, 2 years, I was smoking those kids, dude, smoking them, getting straight A's. I was pushing their asses out of the curve because they got complacent. And I think that there's something that, like, they outscored me on the ACT, they outscored me on the SAT. I think what I'm getting at is that, like, do we need to be thinking about different ways of college admissions? Because, Charles, what you're talking about, I get it. Like, there are some places that are incredible and badass, and that's the way it is, and that's the way things are created. But this is the 21st century, man. Like, shouldn't we be rethinking this shit and rethinking about what we're doing in high school with our kids, and maybe rethinking about not just reassessments of things to get into college, but the point of college as well?
I mean, but
that's our second question. Like, what are these alternative methods we should be thinking about?
I mean, but I think that some of that stuff already exists. I mean, that's what the letter's for. I mean, that's what you get letters, or you do leadership, or you do these things and demonstrate, right? It should be a piece. I don't think anyone here thinks that SAT or ACT scores should be the nominal, the only thing that's being looked at and determined, right? Like, and the reason why this is such a tough question, if we being honest about it, is because the college system does not have control over what K-12s do. They can try to offer up some things or whatever, but because you have such an imbalance of a product that's being performed, That's why they have EOP. That's why they got EOPS. That's why they let you, come and do summer bridge. That's why they let you do these things. That's why, you know what I'm saying? They have remedial courses, or some that did, or whatever the case was, right? Like, I think people are trying, but I think it's easy. I'm not saying anybody's doing this. I'm not saying you're doing this, Omar. I want to be very clear. I think, but it's easy when you're not in it to be like, well, colleges should just, or schools should just, or man, that's a lot of schools. If you run any district anywhere, try to get 3 schools to do something, let alone 300,000. And so I'm just saying, right? Like, I get what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing. I just feel like while we're doing all this experimentation, there's going to be swaths of young people that get lost or regaliated throughout that process while somebody's doing an experiment. But the people doing the experiment, they kids are going to be okay because they always got a back door. And so I like the list. I think the list is cool. I think we've all talked about those things in different ways. So I think it's an interesting conversation that just takes a lot of unpacking. So
and I gotta realize we're at Chipman, and I'm with you. We're at the hour mark. Like, we gotta wrap this sucker up, man. Like, we didn't even get to the third question, getting all involved. This is
let's not talk about you. I thought I was in a dungeon being held captive, and y'all were worried about my safety. So you lost 8 minutes there. So sorry about that. I'm safe.
No worries, man. But like, let's go ahead and just kind of wrap up with final thoughts, because we're at the hour mark, ladies and gentlemen. So you can either, share with me your thoughts on alternative, or the last question is really about how do colleges and universities that have eliminated standardized test requirements in their admissions process ensure a fair and holistic evaluation of applicants, particularly in terms of diversity of representation. So like, hey man, if you got rid of SATs and ACTs, how do we make it fair? But also, how do we empathize with colleges and try to figure out a way of getting kids who are going to succeed in that world? Or just wrap it up with your own thoughts.
Julie, I think that whole thing is a setup anyway. Because say the last part of your question, how students are going to succeed in that world. The fact that this is used as a predictive measure is also an issue, because at some point, right, it's no longer going to be true, right? Yeah, we can take a look and say, okay, this student got this score on SAT, and we think that they're going to do exceptionally well for this entire college experience. But there are no other variables that are being presented in that moment, right? This test is being taken in a vacuum. There are not other things or mountains that have to be climbed while this student is taking the test, right? And so it's almost unfair to use that solely by itself, right? So to the earlier point, like, yes, I think it needs to be a part of a portfolio, right? Part of me is like, who cares about the SAT? There's like a whole bunch of Americans who don't even care. There are farmers out there, there are creatives out there like me, and musicians who can't read, but they can play you like up under a bus. They can play their way to Broadway. They can play for, celebrity musicians and all of that. So it's just like, what kinds of knowledge are we really, really, really assessing? What kind of intelligence are we really assessing? And what kind of intelligence do we value in this country? And I think we keep getting like stuck here. So when you talk about alternative pathways, right? How do we assess multiple intelligences? I think I said this on another episode as well. The SAT assesses only one type of intelligence, or whether it's verbal linguistic or, mathematical reasoning. But right now there could be a 16-year-old somewhere, I'll use the piano example again, who is a maestro, right? How does he get assessed? Maybe he sucks at reading, but he's exceptional at playing 3 different instruments. What's his pathway? You know what I mean? So it's like, I think as a country, I don't know that we've done a good job of being able to meet our students where they are in terms of where their strong suits are, and being able to create a pathway that speaks to those areas of proficiency and passion. So that is what I would suggest as a pathway moving forward, right? And yeah, so that's where I think the bias comes in, that the SAT is only assessing one type of knowledge, or 2 basic kinds of knowledge in one way. You don't have another way to demonstrate what you know on that assessment. And so if you don't know that's not your strong suit, you don't show up well on that test because you don't test well that way. You can't draw, you can't speak, you can't debate, you can't do anything else that will show your knowledge base. So That's that.
That was well said. Dave?
I'll go next. I want to pull up this comment here quickly. The next conversation should, focus on the cost of college textbooks. And the reason why is because of publishing companies. I can't believe we're even selling textbooks anymore, right? In the age of the digital world that we're living in. But it's similar to what we're talking about. And I think some of the reason we can't make sense of this is because we're not talking about it in like its purest educational form. There's a thing called the College Board, which has an incredible amount of influence around these assessments, and they are a for-profit company, and so I think there's what would you call it? There's an elephant in the room that we have not yet discussed. So I think that's number one. I think number two, there are solutions, right? Regardless of what school system young people are in. There are a number of free resources that people can do at home or in school to make up for some of these historical gaps. We all know the brand names of them; they're out there. So there are. You don't have to sign up for an SAT or an ACT prep class. Like, you can do it online for free. I also think the world is changing, and especially with with what we're seeing coming out of AI in education, we're probably going to be moving away from like more of a fact-based kind of value system, and more towards what skills, what like human hard skills and soft skills do people have, and we're seeing that already. And so my last point is, in addition, and I don't think we should throw out the standardized scores. I think we should keep them. They should be included in a more like universal, a more holistic score. But I'm saying, let's bring back grit. Whatever happened to grit? Like, does Kip even talk about grit anymore? Right? And so there are ways of measuring this thing that we called grit, perseverance, right? Problem solving skills, passion, right? Let's bring that back, and let's have colleges and universities incorporate that into their admissions metrics.
Yeah, man. I would say, just in this, I wrote a whole book that was directly to kids entering college like I did, that weren't prepared, but did have that stuff, that grit, that perseverance, and like how to navigate it, right? When I work with young people or any community, I always make sure three things are present: awareness, navigation, and duty. And like, and part of this is because you are supposed to struggle. Like, we want to see how you actually are going to do as you struggle. You know what I'm saying? Like, can you persevere? This is completely free, and it's directly written to Black boys that are in college, and it's written in a way that a 17 or 18-year-old can read it and take it in, and take notes on it, right? Like, again, man, I just think that in life, I get it. I want things to be equitable, and I want things to be fair. But what needs to happen is, life is not fair, and you have to, sometimes some shit gonna hit you. And I think that we have tried to put so many cushions on our kids that when you're gone and their parents are gone and they're 30 and something gonna happen, and they're not gonna know how to deal with it. They're not gonna know how to bounce back. Failure is a part of life. And so I get it, man. I think this SAT conversation was a big one. I'm not looking at it as a singularity thing. Like, I'm looking at it as a bunch of different pieces. But again, as long as we keep, really just damaging our college system, we keep dumbing it down, we keep trying to fit, everybody wants to feel like they welcome everybody. You're not welcome everywhere. I'm not welcome everywhere. I'm just not. It's just not the place for me. And I'll just end it like this. When I played hoop, I was decent, man. I was ranked for a little bit in California, like 2 weeks, because it's a big state. But then, and I did good in the season. I got, some awards. We did okay. I wasn't the star of my team. I was an okay player. Then I went to this camp in LA, this all-star camp. And this cast that ended up going to the league. And they were simply a cut above. And they was like, oh, you are not going to the league if one of them cats went to the league and sat on the bench. That was one of the best basketball players I've ever seen in my life. And sometimes that's just how life is. But when you get punched, how do you come back? When you get knocked down, when you don't know something. And here's the thing. I'm not the smartest, man. But what I am is I will work harder than you. Like, I'm going to beat you. And I know people like, oh, that's a that's steeped in white supremacy or this, that, and the third. Like that's steeped in the people that I know and that I love that created a life for me and created something different for me. You know, that's the stuff that when David's talking about his grandparents and, you know, the people working in those fields, man, like people made a lot of sacrifices for us to be here. So this country got a lot of stuff jacked up and I'm not caping for it in that. And we need to work on that. But that's a separate conversation between, but everybody here, I got two parents on here and I know these parents I know Jubilee and David love equity and fairness and all that. But I also know when they look in their son's face, and they had a tough time, they're gonna be like, hey man, I feel you. I'm gonna wipe off your knee, but you got to get your ass up, man. Like, I'm not gonna be here to take care of you. And so why are we treating other people's kids differently than how we would want our own kids treated? And that would be my final thought. I want the same tough love from David that he gonna give his son because it's filled with love and it's not filled with performance. Give me love, actual love. Not politically correct performance that makes me feel better because I ain't got to deal with you later on.
And I feel you. I think the only tangent that I'm going to take this on, particularly because like the show is well over the hour mark, is as an educator myself and as someone who's like running a high school, I think that the tough love needs to be imposed in the educational system. These levels of competencies, these different ways of teaching students how to be successful in life and in college is something that I founded the organization on, and is like what I am really pushing in terms of the knowledge-based scenario that we have, and you brought it up, is done, dude. Like, knowledge is cool. Like, it's nice to know like why the War of 1812 happened, and you sound dope to understand like, you know, every single Bill of Rights. I'm really adept into like, why did we need the Fourth Amendment?
Yeah.
Why did we need the Seventh Amendment? And I think the analytical skills is something that we need to be pushing a great deal, not just the knowledge base. And as we grow as a society, and like you've got that knowledge on your phone, and I know this is conspiracy driven theory, but not really, as like humans get synthesized with technology and we're able to like have the computer in our brain and start recalling things like this, it's going to be these competencies, the ability to get up from failure, the ability to understand your strengths and your weaknesses, the ability to find networks of support and build teams of support systems that are going to make the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people. Look, like, let me put on my educator hat. Let me put on my like CEO hat for a second. I don't think people run organizations effectively. I think that people that run organizations are fucking incompetent for the most part. And it's because they got there because of bullshit stuff, like they flew in on some dope ass SAT score, got into some good ass college because mom and dad are rich. And Doc, I'm with you in that, like, there are some places people don't belong. Those motherfuckers don't belong. And I think that there needs to be a much more critical way of analyzing who we're letting into colleges, who we're letting into positions of power, who we're bringing into our boardrooms, who we're allowing into CEO positions that are based on science and competency levels of things like, for lack of a better term, grit, the ability to understand resources, to do incredible analytic work that are going to bode with greater levels of success and competency than just one test. And I think we got to rethink the competency, the rationale of this test altogether. I mean, we should rethink the fact that, like, yo, man, the College Board's making millions upon millions upon millions of dollars from this shit. They have no reason to get rid of it. And I'm with you. There needs to be something, but I just don't think it needs to be this. So I didn't want the final word, but we're out. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of David Castillo, the Beard of Knowledge, Dr. Charles Cole, the real doctor, the lovely and radiant and wonderful and brilliant Jubilee Ransom, this is the South Star Classroom, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. The
You got it.
We're good. We will see you all next week. Love you.